Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know now, because we are close to the end of our 33rd season, I interview writers about their craft, what they're working on, what they've accomplished, what they might be planning for the future. It's a wider net than writers, however. We have had on other brands of artists now and then. We have had on musicians, we've had on sculptors, we've had on painters. So if you have an idea for an artist, writer or other variety, who might be a good fit for the Writer's Block, watch for our address at the end of the show. We would love to get your suggestions. I also want to remind you that the Writer's Block and all the other original programming produced by 1623 Studios is a result of cable access television. It's a valuable community service here on Cape Ann, and it's not one you get with other systems of accessing the internet, like Dish. Stick with cable, stick with the Writer's Block. I'm very happy to say tonight we do have a writer, a gentleman by the name of William Waller. I should say Dr. William Waller because he has a PhD in astronomy. And he's going to be talking about a new book of his titled Astronomy. For introduction, I'm going to read a brief blurb that's on the back of his new book. William Waller worked as an astrophysicist at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center and as an astronomy professor at Tufts University before becoming a high school science teacher. He is the co-author with Paul Hodge of Galaxies and the Cosmic Frontier, and the author of The Milky Way, An Insider's Guide. He lives in Rockport. Bill Waller, welcome to the Writer's Block.
It's great to be here again, John.
Yes, you were on with your sister Sue talking about your father, Marvin Waller, as a painter.
As a painter, his artwork and his drawings. Yeah. Well, his paintings and his drawings.
Yes.
And then in 2013, I think I was on for the Milky Way book, and probably was on earlier for the Galaxies and the Cosmic Frontier book. And then before that, my mother was on.
Yes, I remember your mom.
So it's a nice thing to keep doing.
Good. Well, we'll have you back again after the next book.
Right.
I always ask my guests a little background at the beginning. Were you originally from Cape Ann?
Yes. Well, I was born in Mount Vernon, New York, where I spent my first 6 years. But then the family moved up to Rockport. My father was an artist, and he was attracted to Rockport's art scene. And there was a friend of his, Roger Martin, who attracted him here as well. And so I pretty much grew up in Rockport, then went away for 25 years and came back to the house which I grew up in, with my mom still in it.
Your mom is still in that house?
Well, she's passed on since. But we were able to have her in the house for another 10 years, so that was pretty cool.
Good. Roger Martin and your father were both involved in the forming the school in Beverly, I believe.
Right, Montserrat.
Montserrat, yes.
Roger more than my father. Perhaps they knew that he was a great artist, but maybe not a great teacher, and so he was not invited to be part of that scene. But he was part of the art scene involving Roger Martin and other people in that group that founded Montserrat.
So you went away for 25 years and came back, and you've been in Rockport since, on Cape Ann since.
Right, yeah, beginning in 97. My father passed away in 94, and it was important to be able to hold on to the house with my mom still in it for a while. So I brought my young family up. And
you're now still in the same house?
Still in the same house, yes. A granite house on Granite Street in Rockport, Massachusetts. You get the picture.
Very close to Pigeon Cove, I think.
In Pigeon Cove, yeah.
In Pigeon Cove, yeah.
Near Halibut Point, about 100 yards from Halibut Point.
Granite House on Granite Street.
Right.
It's a good book title.
And I can still see the Milky Way, which is something I could not do at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center which is near DC, or many other places where I've been, like Seattle. The dark sky that we have surprisingly close to Boston enables us to see the Milky Way on moonless nights, dark of the moon, on clear moonless nights. And it's a treasure. It's also a valuable natural resource which we need to protect.
Tell us, for some of our viewers who might not have seen the Milky Way, what the Milky Way is.
It's kind of a ghostly, diaphanous band of light that is most prominent in the night sky for us around late summer and early fall. That's when the constellations of Cassiopeia and Cygnus are highest in the sky. And on nights where you don't have a moon, it's possible to see it. You have to get away from any nearby lighting. You can't see it from the parking lot in Gloucester, for example.
And then let your eye adjust.
Let your eye adjust. And not only will you just see this ghostly band, but if you look at it more carefully, it will look a little bit mottled, a little bit plated. And that's because there are clouds of dust here and there which are obscuring the background starlight. And that gives structure to the Milky Way, which can be seen vividly in long exposure photographs.
Yeah. So the Milky Way is a beautiful metaphor. It's also it's a galaxy.
Yes.
Our own galaxy that you describe from the inside,
Mm-hmm.
and another
In the other book, yep. So this book is a more generic book. It's astronomy, a beginner's guide.
Yes,
And it's part of a series of beginner's guides which One World Publications offers on all kinds of subjects.
I'm going to hold this up to a camera and hope that Tyler can show our graphic, which you sent, which is a clearer image of the book cover. It's astronomy for beginners. You don't need extensive math for this. You don't need to know stellar history or chemistry. It's very readable, and also readable because you have a good sense of humor. I mentioned before the show, I love the quotations that you start every chapter with, and they move from Einstein to Douglas Adams and Shakespeare and others. Douglas Adams, of course, wrote a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is an appropriate title for your book. And Einstein talks about profundity and, well, maybe I should read these, or maybe I could ask you to read. Could you read the first Einstein quotation on chapter 1?
That's chapter 1.
And then
1.
maybe...
Okay. I have to say that this book is now available as a paperback, and it is the smallest physically of the books that I've written. It's almost a pocket book, but it's also available as an ebook, like through Kindle, where if you have an iPad, it'll actually be bigger. And it's going to happen sometime soon. It will be an audiobook, being narrated by a very erudite British man. Can't remember his name, but that should be fun because he gives a certain panache to the words. So here's Albert Einstein and what I believe.
Okay.
The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science. And I think, is it chapter 2? He also said, in the world as I see it, the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is at all comprehensible.
Yes. That's a wonderful line. I'd seen it. That's yes, the most incomprehensible thing is that it is in fact comprehensible.
Right.
Somewhat.
So he goes from one statement which talks about the mysterious, and science, and art are ways to plumb the mysteries. And then he goes and turns it around to say, yes, but it's also comprehensible. It's rational. It's something
Yes.
that can be figured out,
Yes,
the universe.
and we're scratching away at it.
Exactly.
Would you also share with us the quotation at the beginning of chapter 9, which is page 171? This is a
Oh, that's good. So,
somewhat different point of view.
so this gives me a chance to note that the book is structured in a certain way. The first part is basically first impressions, what the naked eye sky looks like, what the sky appears and does, because it moves around, and how it appears from the northern hemisphere versus the southern hemisphere, all without optical aid. It's what you can see. Then the second part plumbs the structure of the universe, and it is an exquisite hierarchy of matter going from the solar system to other star systems, near and far, to the whole Milky Way galaxy, and then other galaxies, and then those galaxies are structured into groups and clusters, superclusters, and ultimately the cosmic web. So there's this exquisite hierarchy which I felt responsible for imparting. And then the the third part is our moment in time. It's basically the story of the universe, and it begins with the hot Big Bang, and that's what this chapter is about. And Douglas Adams in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy says, "In the beginning was the creation of the universe. This has made a lot of people angry and has been widely regarded as a bad move."
I wanted to make sure I got a couple of those quotations in, because it shows, I think, for the people who are on the verge of going out and buying the book in one of its forms, that this is not, this is a comprehensible book. We borrow the word from Einstein. It's a comprehensible book. And I think one of the reasons is, as you just pointed out, it goes from gradual steps, talking about observations, historical observations from the Earth, and then solar system. I wonder if we can go back to that for just a minute. You can mention a couple of the other early facts about observation from the Earth.
Oh,
And then
sure.
then it's expansion into the discovery of the solar system.
Well, one big thing is that what we see depends on where we are on this spherical planet. They didn't know back in the day that it was spherical, but it took a while. They had to communicate with other people at other latitudes. Basically, it's the north-south thing, because with the Earth spinning, you get to sample all around in one direction. But in the north-south direction, if you live in the northern hemisphere, there will be parts of the sky in basically a projection of the southern hemisphere. The southerly parts of the sky you'll never see. For example, I can enjoy beautiful views of the Pleiades star cluster, especially now at this time of year in December, and Taurus's snoot. I can spot that, and I can spot the double cluster in Perseus, a cluster of stars. I get to see all these wonderful objects which are in the northern sky, but I'm deprived of seeing the large and small Magellanic Clouds, which are companion galaxies to our own. I can't see the
Southern Cross.
the Southern Cross or the Coal Sack, because those are all in a southerly direction, at latitudes way south of the celestial equator. And so people had to come around to this idea that that can only be true if there are objects which we can't see. There must be a horizon below which we cannot see anything. And that is a consequence of a curved planet. And so I discuss that idea that if the planet was perfectly flat, you would be able to see England from New England if you had a strong enough telescope. But that's not the case. We cannot see England from New
And I
England.
want to point out, you have some nice graphics in here. Figure 2.1 illustrates geometrically exactly that, that problem of the horizon cutting our vision off. It depends on your height. 6 feet or 6 miles determines where your horizon's going to be.
Right. And so that all had to be figured out, and there was a method for determining the actual circumference of the Earth, assuming a sphere. That was based on observations of the sun at noon at the solstice, summer solstice, June 21. And so from two places separated north and south, one of them was Syene, which is present-day Aswan in Egypt, versus Alexandria, which is at the Mediterranean, north of Aswan. And they compared the altitudes of the sun on that particular day and time, and they found that they differed by a certain amount, a 50th of a circle. And Eratosthenes was able to surmise that the actual circumference of the Earth was 50 times the distance between those two cities.
Their sophistication is breathtaking when you see, and they didn't have computers.
No.
They were lucky if they had paper.
Yeah. Yep. Well, they draw a lot in the sand. So let the kids draw on sand.
Yeah. So the early astronomers, thousands, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, knew, some of them knew, that we were on a sphere and that we were part of a broad system. They had no idea about how distant it was. When they watched the moving, what came to be known as planets, who traveled within the background of the stars, they had no idea about the distance. What were the discoveries that allowed us to see something about the solar system and its depth?
Well, at first we thought everything went around the Earth because it sure as heck looked like it. You know, you see the sun rise and set, and it's a great explanation for what happens to the sun. It, you know, rises above the horizon, that horizon again, and then sets below the horizon. It's probably because in that view, a geocentric view, the sun goes around the Earth once a day. And
Makes sense.
As do all the stars and all the planets, but those planets do that funny, what's known as retrograde and prograde motion, and across the sky. So they had to explain that, and so they used wheels on wheels, basically like a spirograph machine. They'd have the planet going around the Earth, but it would make the loops as it went around. And they were able to predict the positions of planets fairly well, but with more accurate, more precise instruments, naked eye instruments still, but you could spot and find angles. Their predictions were not as good as the observations. And so around the 1500s with Copernicus, Nikolai Copernicus, he posited a sun-centered system where everything went around the sun, except for the moon, which went around the Earth. And he was able to explain that funny loop-the-loop of the planets by the fact that the inner planets go around faster than the outer planets. It's like on a racetrack, usually the inner lane, you can lap the other guy. And so in the process of lapping, that planet appears to go backwards for a while. And so he was able to explain that funny motion of the planets, and he was able to at least produce predictions that were of similar accuracy as the more refined geocentric model. But it took more observations to really pin down the fact that the sun was at the center.
Is it true that the Earth-centric systems could be still explained, but it's extremely messy and complicated and virtually impossible? But they can work if you really wanted to.
Right, and it would the fancy name is epicycles on deference, and they had to do a number of things. The epicycles, the motion in the epicycle was not constant. They make it change a little bit. And then the center of the motion was not necessarily located on the deference orbit around the Earth. So, they messed with all the various parameters to get it as right as possible. That lasted for 1,000 years. The geocentric model as codified by Ptolemy, who was an interesting man. I think he was a Greek working in Egypt. And
I want to mention that we have a couple of photographs taken by GAC,
the GAC stars.
Gloucester
Area Astronomy Club.
Which are very professional, because I want to remind our audience what we're talking about in terms of beauty and depth. So Tyler, our director, is going to show two images. The first is Andromeda, our so-called neighbor. I love the understatement. Our neighbor galaxy is only about 2 million light years away. Is that correct? About
2.5 million light years.
2.5
but who's
million.
counting?
They're right next door. This is Andromeda, a galaxy which looks very much as ours would from their point of view, assuming there's a they there. This could well be the Milky Way. This was taken by Phil Urbains, a wonderful astronomical photographer who was a member of the GAC organization. And this was done over a number of years and a number of hours with his instruments. It comes, I believe, in color as well as black and white. We happen to have it black and white tonight, and I think it's still a breathtaking photograph. How far is 2.5 light years? Is there any way?
A million. Wait a second. Million light years.
2.5 million light years.
Yeah. Well, 1 light year is about 6 trillion miles.
6 trillion.
So you want to do the math?
1 light year, 6 trillion miles.
Yeah.
And that's broader than our solar system, or about as broad
right.
as our solar system.
The distance to the next nearest star system, the Alpha Centauri system, is about 4.2 light years.
So it would take 4.2 years for light to travel from the Alpha Centauri system to us.
Correct.
A light year is not a time measurement, it's distance. How far light would travel in a year.
Correct.
And it's very fast.
It's very fast.
So that's Andromeda, taken by Phil Urbains. We're very grateful to Phil's art and his permission to use that here in the program.
So we see that light as it was 2.5 million years ago.
Yes.
It was released by stars 2.5 million years ago. And it's kind of humbling, but you can see it from Cape Ann if you find a good site.
It's the only galaxy that we can see with the naked eye, I believe.
Pretty much. I mean,
the Magellanic Clouds are
but that's the southern.
Galaxies. Yes.
We miss out on those. Some people claim to be able to see the Pinwheel Galaxy in Triangulum, which is near Andromeda, and it's part of the same local group of galaxies.
It's another understatement I love in astronomy, the local group.
Yeah.
This I want to make sure we get to another photograph by Phil Urbains, which is of the so-called Horsehead Nebula. The horsehead shape imagined here in that cloud of dust is visible in the center, near the center. You can see why. It looks like a horse's head turned left, perhaps, if we're looking at the horse from the rear. This is taken by Phil, and we have his permission to use it. We're grateful for this as well. This is in the galaxy, or the constellation Orion. Can you describe where in Orion that is?
Okay. So many people are familiar with the Orion constellation. It has these 3 stars in a row, which are very prominent in the wintertime and into the early spring. Those are 3 bright stars that make up the belt of Orion the Hunter. And The leftmost belt star, as seen by us, I think is Alnilam. They're Alnilam, Alnitak, and Mintaka. I just love it sounds like a Three Stooges thing.
Arabic
Yep.
name.
And this nebula is very close to the leftmost star, which I believe is Alnilam. And but there's another star which is irradiating it, known as Sigma Orionis, and that star is closer to the nebula, and it's especially hot, and so it is photo-evaporating a cloud of gas and dust, and you can see the front, basically the photo-evaporation front, as that long horizontal line. Excuse me.
I want to mention that this is within our galaxy. The Andromeda is another galaxy. This is within our galaxy. Almost everything you can see with the naked eye is within our galaxy.
Right.
And this is so-called Horsehead Nebula. I just glanced at our clock. I hate to do this, but we're almost out of time. I love this stuff. I ground a 6-inch mirror when I was in high school.
You're a better man than I am.
Part of an astronomy club. So I love this, and I hate to break off, but I think we must, or the people who show us follow ours will get mad.
Mm-hmm.
I want to thank you,
Sure.
Dr. William Waller, professor of astronomy, for sharing your knowledge with us about your new book, Astronomy, A Guide. It's really inspiring. I love this stuff, and I hope it just came out, and I hope as it appears in different forms, an audio book and ebook, that many in our audience and across the country, or after we're on YouTube, across the planet, pick up this book. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
I want to thank you in TV land for being with us as well. If you've learned something from William Waller about astronomy and its breathtaking beauty, then the writer's block has done its job. Thanks for being with us, and I hope to see you again next show on the writer's block. Good night.